Chapter 11 of Ruth Fielding at the War Front. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ruth Fielding at the War Front by Alice B. Emerson. The Flying Man. While yet the silent figure was some rods away, Ruth Fielding realized it was no human being. It was not one of the men she had seen in the garden of Nico's cottage. This creature came too swiftly up the path, and skimmed the ground too closely, a light-colored object, swift, silent, and threatening of aspect. The girl shrank against the hedge, and the next instant, with a rush of passage that stirred the air all about her, the thing was gone. It was again that strange and incomprehensible apparition of the werewolf. It was Boo-Boo, the greyhound she had seen at the Chateau Marchand. He was much lighter in color than when he appeared pacing beside his mistress on the chateau lawns. The phantom had dashed past so rapidly that in the gathering dusk Ruth could make out little of its real appearance. Headed toward the battle lines, it had disappeared within seconds. The girl, her limbs still trembling, followed in haste to the highway. Already the creature had been swallowed up in the shadows. She went on toward the hospital gateway and had scarcely recovered her self-control when she arrived there. Altogether, her evening's experience had been most disconcerting. The two men, dressed alike and apparently of the same height and shambling manner, whom she had seen in Nico's garden, worried her quite as much, indeed worried her even more than the sight of the mysterious creature the peasants called the werewolf. More than ever was she determined to take into her confidence somebody who would be able to explain the mystery of it all. At least he would be able to judge if what made her so anxious was of moment. And Tom Cameron's disappearance, too. Ruth's worry of mind regarding her old friend propped her eyes open that night. In the morning she went over the stock shelves again with the girl she had trained, and finally announced to Mrs. Strang that she felt she must return to Clare. After all, she had been assigned to the job there and must not desert it. An ambulance was going down to Clare with its burden of wounded men, and Ruth was assigned to the seat beside the driver. He chanced to be Cub Holdness, one of the ambulance drivers to whom Ruth had been introduced by Charlie Bragg at Mother Gervaise's cottage the night of her trip up to the field hospital. Holdness was plainly delighted to have the girl with him for the drive to Clare. He was a Philadelphia boy, and he confessed to having had no chance to drive a girl, even in an ambulance, since coming over. "I had one of those reckless roadsters back home," he sighed. "Dad said every time his telephone rang, he expected it was me calling from some outlying police station for him to come and bail me out for over-speeding. And there was a bunch of girls I knew who were just crazy to have me take 'em for a spin out around Fairmount Park and along the speedways. Just think, Miss Fielding, of the differences between those times and these." And he nodded solemnly. "I should say there was a difference," laughed Ruth, trying to appear in good spirits. "Don't you get dreadfully tired of all these awful sights and sounds?" "No, excitement keeps us keyed up, I guess," he replied. "You know, there's almost always something doing." "I should say there was." She saw that while he talked he did not for a moment forget that he was driving 3 sorely wounded men. He eased the ambulance over the rough parts of the road and around the sharp turns with infinite skill. It was actually wonderful how smoothly the ambulance ran. Occasionally they were caught in a tight corner, and the machine jounced so that the moans of agony were wrung from the lips of the wounded behind them on the stretchers. This, however, occurred but seldom. Once one of the men begged for water to drink in its coolness on his head. They were passing a trickling stream that looked clear and refreshing. "Let me get out a moment and get him some," begged Ruth. "Can't do it. Against orders. We're commanded not to taste water from any stream, spring, or well in this sector, let alone give it to the wounded. Nobody knows when the water is poisoned." "But the Germans have been gone from this district so long now," she cried. "They may have their spies here. In fact, grumbled Holdness, we are sure they do have friends in the sector. Oh, you know that Devil Corner Charlie Bragg drove you past the other night? The shells have torn that all to pieces. We have to go fully 2 miles around by another road to get to Clare. We don't pass Mother Gervaise's place any more. Ruth looked at him sadly, but questioningly. Do you believe that story they tell about one of our young officers having gone over to the enemy? She asked. Holdness flushed vividly. I didn't know him. I've got no opinion on the matter, Miss Fielding, he said, but somebody has mapped out the whole sector for the Huns, and it has cost lives and ammunition. You can't blame folks for being suspicious. The answer quenched her conversation. Ruth scarcely spoke again during the remainder of the journey. They welcomed her in a most friendly fashion at the Clare Hospital, but the first thing she did after depositing her bag in her cell was to go to the telegraph office and put before the military censor the following message addressed to the prefect of police at Lise. Will you please communicate with Monsieur Lefrene? I have something of importance to tell him. She signed her name and occupation in full to this, and was finally assured that it would be sent. Monsieur Lefrene was of the secret police, and Ruth Fielding had been in communication with him on a previous occasion. Several days passed with no reply from her communication to the police, nor did any news reach her from the field hospital where she had been engaged, nor from her friends at the front. Indeed, those working near the battle lines really knew less of what is being done in this war than civilians in America, for instance. Almost every night the guns thundered, and it was reported that the Americans were making sorties into the German lines and bearing back both prisoners and plunder. But just what was being accomplished, Ruth Fielding had no means of knowing. Not having seen or heard from Henriette Dupay since her return, early in the following week, Ruth started to walk briskly to the Dupay farm one afternoon. Of late the aeroplanes had become very numerous over this sector. They were, for the most part, American machines, but this afternoon she chanced to see one of the French Nieuports at close quarters. These are the scouting or battle planes and carry but 2 men and a machine gun. She heard the motor some moments before seeing the aeroplane rise over the treetops. She knew it must have leaped from a large field on this side of the Dupay farm, and not far below the gateway of the Chateau Marchand. Ruth stopped to gaze upward at the soaring plane. Her figure stood out plainly in the country road, and the 2 men aboard the Nieuport must have immediately spied her. The machine dipped and scaled downward until she could have thrown a stone upward and hit it. One of the men, masked and helmeted as the flying men always are, leaned from his seat, and she saw him looking down upon her through the tangle of stay wires. Then he dropped a small white object that fell like a plummet at her feet. "What in the world can that be?" murmured the girl to herself. For a breath she was frightened. Although the aeroplane carried the French insignia, it might be an enemy machine. She, too, was obsessed with the fear of spies. But the object that fell was not an explosive bomb. It was a weighted ball of oiled silk. As the machine soared again and rapidly rose to the upper air levels, the girl picked up the strange object and burst it open. The lead pellets that weighted the globe were scattered on the ground. Within, there was nothing else but a strip of heavy document paper. On this was traced in a handwriting she knew well this unsigned message: "Don't believe everything you hear." It was Tom Cameron's handwriting, and Ruth knew that the message was meant for her eye, and her eye only. End of chapter 11.